right now on the Daily Debrief. 2 mass shootings over the weekend leave 31 people dead and the nation reeling. Will anything be done to stop future attacks? And a verdict is in the case of a daughter accused of murdering her mother and stepfather.
The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged.
Plus, we'll preview closing statements in the Hollywood Ripper serial killer trial. The Daily Debrief recaps the day in court. It's Monday, August 5th.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Rachel Stockman in for Aaron Keller, and I have a great panel with me this evening. We'll get to them in just a minute. The nation continues to reel after 2 mass shootings in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio that left a combined 31 people dead. CNN is reporting the Justice Department is considering making mass shootings a capital crime. President Trump today spoke about the shootings.
The First Lady and I join all Americans in praying and grieving for the victims, their families, and the survivors. We will stand by their side forever. We will never forget. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul.
Speaking of those message boards, the extremist message board 8chan, where the suspected El Paso shooter appears to have posted an anti-immigrant manifesto, has lost multiple web security platforms, effectively taking the website offline. The El Paso massacre follows the Christchurch mosque attack and California synagogue shootings as the third, get this, third mass shooting that a suspect posted on 8chan before the event. Just a terrible set of developments over the weekend. I was listening on Saturday and then I woke up to another shooting to hear about this one in Ohio. And the question to my guest, Ashley Willcott, Michael Bryant with me on set, what can be done to stop it? These message boards, obviously the web hosts that host them can take them down, but can we prevent people from posting on these?
You know, it seems to me, I know freedom of speech, you got to be able to post it. I get that. But why are we not monitoring them more and acting on the things we see? It's almost like a coming soon for the next mass shooting. Why are we not just following up? What's the FBI doing?
And Ashley, to you, making mass shootings like this a capital offense, would that change? Do you think that would actually deter any of these people from doing this?
Well, I think that's the goal, and it might, but I think the reality is, Rachel, that it just is unfortunately something that I think people are going to continue to do, whether or not they have any deterrent, such as the death penalty, and there's got to be a different, better way to stop it.
Because at this point, the fact that they just want the attention. These people are seeking the attention, and we in the media continue every mass shooting to give the shooter more attention than the victims. And I just wonder if we're aiding in this horrible influx of mass shootings that has gone on.
You know, I think if mental issues, they're going to glom onto anything they can. I mean, if it's the attention, great. If it's their attempt to have suicide by law enforcement, that's going to motivate them. I can't say the media is totally to blame, but certainly it could be played a little differently to make it look less like they're stars.
Certainly. All right, moving on. Guilty. The verdict for a Florida student accused of shooting and killing her mother and stepfather. Nicole Nachman was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The jury rejected her defense that she was insane at the time she committed the crimes and suffered from battered child syndrome from years of alleged abuse from her mother, including fat shaming. The jury deliberated well into the night, coming back at 1 a.m. with their decision. Take a listen.
State of Florida versus Nicole Nachman. We, the jury find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged. During the commission of the offense, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Yes. During the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally discharge a firearm? Yes. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged. During the commission of the offense, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Yes. During the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally discharge a firearm? Yes.
During the defense's case, the defendant's, during closing arguments, the state argued the defendant was legally sane and can be convicted. Take a listen.
These are not disorganized, illogical thoughts. These are not hallucinations. She knows exactly what she's done and what's happening. There are no suicidal thoughts in her mind when she talks to Joey. And what's one of the last things she says? If only I would have gotten the news earlier, I wouldn't have had to do it. If only she would have gotten the news about her housing earlier, she wouldn't have had to set the trap that she set for her mother to walk right into so that she could kill her and eliminate her from her life and eliminate the way that she hampered Nicole from living the life the way she wanted to live it. And she killed Robert first for no reason but that he stood in her way of executing her plan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not unsympathetic to mental illness. And it is not disputed that Nicole Stockman has a mental illness. But her mental illness did not justify the execution-style murders of Robert and Miriam Deans between August the 18th and August the 20th of 2015. And based on that, we are asking that you find her guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
The defense argued that Nicole Stockman was both psychotic and delusional when she pulled the trigger and was unaware of the consequences.
Does that make sense? Happy, loved, developed teenagers, college students wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to execute my plan as the state wants you to believe and shoot my mother and my stepfather for no reason whatsoever. What caused this happy, fun-loving child that everybody testified to in this trial, even the state's witnesses, to go from this? She's contemplating killing herself. She's contemplating what she's going to do about housing. She is psychotic and delusional. The only verdict supported by the facts, the law, and the evidence is one of not guilty by reason of insanity as to both counts. Because when Nicole Stockman shot Robert Deans and Miriam Deans, she was psychotic, she was delusional, she was schizophrenic, and she did not know what she was doing or its consequences.
All right, that was certainly an interesting case that we saw unfold here on the Law and Crime Network. Michael, let's turn it to you now. What did you make of the defense's case? Because the prosecution tried to reiterate over and over again. At the time of the crime, there were steps she took before and after that proved very much that she knew what she was doing.
I really think, this is just me, that both defenses were horrible and they had no chance of succeeding. However, it took the death penalty off the table. Remember, the death penalty initially was sought by the state, and then they took it off because of this mental health issue, thinking maybe the jury wouldn't recommend death in that scenario. Otherwise, you know, there's no battered history, there's no mental health history to support either defense. I'm thinking maybe they just figured, hey, we saved her life.
Ashley, maybe that was the strategy the whole time.
That's what I wonder too. I completely agree with Michael, and I think the other piece that's so significant is rather that, you know, they didn't throw away the opportunity to make her sound as sympathetic as they could. They did take that advantage, and maybe that was their strategy, and maybe it worked to take the death penalty off the table.
What abuse did she face?
Well,
seriously.
I just need to speak to that because, you know, in listening, Rachel, I don't think she did. I think that's the point. I think that she was instead angry of what her mother was going to do to her for failing out of college or some of the other things that were going on.
And sure, maybe her mom didn't treat her right. We're not denying that. The mom was not a good mom,
It wasn't
right?
mommy dearest. I mean, it wasn't that bad. You know, every child feels like their parents are putting upon them and nagging. When nagging equals battery, we got a problem.
Yeah, this wasn't a case like Gypsy Rose. Remember that case?
Oh, that was horrible.
Where the mother was psychologically abusing this child, taking her. We didn't see evidence of this in this case.
Not at all.
What about the fat shaming?
Okay, I mean, yeah, it's bad. Maybe that's emotional abuse, but does it rise to the level of being an abuse that warrants a self-defense or this type of action? I would suggest no.
What was the motivation? That's what I watched a lot of this case and I read a lot. What was the motivation that she killed these?
Yeah, that is really, it's really unknown. And that, I think, gets us to the mental health issue, but that's not an insanity defense. Yeah, I think she was a little off and she's definitely got some mental issues. And that led to some horrible crimes, but not enough to excuse those crimes.
Did she have a history prior to this, Ashley, that you were able to see?
Well, I mean, there was some history, but I don't
Sure.
think it was significant enough. And again, I think that's the important distinction, is the mental health is very different than the insanity defense, that at the time she committed the crime, she didn't know what she was doing or didn't understand the consequences. Very different than being schizophrenic.
All right, excellent panel this evening. We're going to keep them here. Meanwhile, still ahead tonight on the debrief, opening arguments are set to begin in the case of a Tennessee man accused of raping and murdering a college couple. Plus, finally, the conclusion in the trial of the Hollywood Ripper, accused of terrorizing women. We'll be right back after this break. A jury is seated in the trial of a Tennessee man accused of double murder in the death of a college couple. Boyd faces life in prison if convicted in the deaths of 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. The details of their death are gruesome. Both victims were allegedly beaten, raped, and murdered. Newsom was shot 3 times, then doused in gasoline and set on fire. Christian is believed to have been held captive for 24 hours, repeatedly sexually assaulted, then stuffed in a trash can and left to die, slowly suffocating. Boyd claims he wasn't anywhere near the home when the crime occurred. 4 other co-defendants have already been convicted in this case. LaMarcus Davidson, the alleged ringleader, was sentenced to death for first-degree murder. Lidalvis Cobbins and George Thomas received life sentences for first-degree murder. Thomas will testify against Boyd. In exchange, we'll see his sentence reduced to 50 years. And Vanessa Coleman was acquitted of first-degree murder but found guilty of lesser crimes and received 35 years. Tuesday, we will return to a Los Angeles courtroom for closing arguments in the trial of the alleged Hollywood Ripper serial killer. Michael Gargiulo is facing 2 murder charges in the stabbing deaths of Ashley Allerman and Mario Bruno, and 1 attempted charge for stabbing Michelle Murphy. All of these occurred between 2001 and 2008. He's also accused of killing an 18-year-old woman outside of Chicago. He will stand trial in Illinois after the conclusion of the California case. Now, video cameras have only been allowed in court during opening and closing statements. In their opening statement, the prosecution portrayed the defendant as a man with a double life and noted similarities between the victims.
As a husband and a father. What no one knew for many years, however, was that Michael Gargiulo was leading a double life. Michael Gargiulo, for almost 15 years, was watching, always watching. And his hobby was plotting the perfect opportunity to attack women with a knife in and around their homes. What you will hear is that Tricia Picaccio, Ashley Ellerin, Michelle Murphy, and Maria Bruno were all young, attractive, and outgoing. What these women also had in common was they all lived near Gargiulo.
The case has gained national attention because one of the witnesses is a Hollywood star. Ashton Kutcher testified in May that he and the victim had plans for a first date the night she was murdered. He knocked on her door and looked through the window, mistaking blood on the floor for red wine stains. The defense's strategy? To poke holes in each woman's case one by one. Here's how they tried to introduce reasonable doubt about whether Gargiulo killed the victim that was supposed to have a date with Kutcher.
When the case is put on by the prosecution, I can assure you at the conclusion of that presentation of evidence, you will not find one single bit of physical evidence attributed to Miss Ellerman's death. And when they secured the location, the residence of Ashley Ellerman, they concluded that whoever attacked and brutally killed Miss Ellerman, there was no evidence of breaking points of entry into her residence. You're going to learn in this trial that there were 4 people who had keys to the residence of Ashley Ellerman. Obviously, Ashley had a key to her house. Her roommate at the time, Jennifer DeSisto, had a key to the residence. The apartment, or I should say the building manager, a man by the name of Mark Durbin. Mark Durbin. I think he's going to be an important witness for you to focus on as it relates to the homicide.
The prosecution also played a 911 call from Michelle Murphy, the victim who fought off her attacker and survived.
Hello? Hi, this is the San Monica Police Department. Are you calling from 1229 12th Street? Yes. Okay, what is your name? Michelle. Michelle, what happened? Where is that person now? How long ago?
Not more than 7 or 8 minutes ago. I don't know. I think everything.
The fire department is on our way, and we are already there. We're looking for the guy now. We'll be making contact with you in just a second.
All right, this has certainly been an interesting case. Some of the details very brutal. Hearing from that surviving witness, we weren't able to have cameras in the courtroom when she testified, but reading the accounts of what she had to endure, obviously very heart-wrenching. I want to bring in my panel for this evening. Lakai, Vinson, a criminal defense attorney. Judge Ashley Willcott joins me again on set, as well as Michael Bryant, an attorney and Law&Crime host and analyst. Ashley, let's first talk about the brutal nature of this case. How does that affect jurors when they're listening to something like this?
Well, remember, this is a circumstantial case, and I think that the way the prosecution is really going to get across not just the circumstantial evidence, but also to convince the jury this defendant did it, is to look at how brutal and horrific these crimes. 4 different victims. Yes, you have a surviving victim, but really horrific crimes that you can't even imagine someone would do. They are completely going to use that to their advantage.
Lakai, this isn't completely circumstantial, though, because there is some DNA evidence linking him to the scenes.
Yeah. As it relates to Ms. Murphy, my understanding in following this trial is that she grabbed the knife with her hand, and as a result of grabbing the knife with her hand, she inadvertently and at some point throughout the struggle also cuts the defendant. And so as a result of that, his DNA is found at the crime scene. So there's certainly some DNA evidence that links the defendant with this particular crime and this particular victim.
Michael Bryant, to you, the strength of the prosecution's case here.
Well, you know, Michelle Murphy is a superhero. I mean, this is a woman. We're listening to that 911 call 7 or 8 minutes after the alleged defendant left. And, you know, she's been stabbed a bunch of times, and she sounds like, you know, she just lost her dog. So she then testifies in the case, and it had to be the key witness in the case for the prosecution. And because it's a pattern evidence type case, what she found and the DNA found at the crime scene where she was living is used in the other cases and helps draw that pattern together, you know, to hope, you know, for the prosecution that they can get all of the convictions from really this one key witness.
So all of the crimes he's being charged with in this particular case happened between 2001 and 2008. So my question to you, Ashley, is why did it take them so long to figure out that this guy may have been the one that did this?
Well, you know, that's not unusual when you have multiple victims. There's usually some piece of evidence, something that happens that triggers the thought of this may be the defendant in this case, and then they link the crimes together. So when you talk about the DNA that was at the surviving victim's home, they then can look at the pattern and say, wait a minute, it may have been him that did these crimes as well. It's unfortunately not unusual. When you have a lot of victims and you have not caught the suspect or named a defendant, it takes one tiny little piece of evidence you may not expect that suddenly blows the case wide open.
Let's also talk about his, what some might consider delay tactics. We know he changed attorneys multiple times. We know that he tried to represent himself during the course of this. Do you think, Lakai, that perhaps this was a tactic he was using in order not to face the trial?
I think, unfortunately, when it comes to defendants, they sometimes think they know more than defense counsel. And so I think what happened is he thought he knew more than defense counsel, asked for a new attorney, received a new attorney, was dissatisfied with that. Then at some point he decided he was capable of representing himself, realized that it was too much, and now has defense counsel available to him. So I don't necessarily think that this particular defendant was smart enough to make that strategic decision, but I think sometimes defendants, unfortunately, believe that they know more than counsel.
And in this particular case, we talked about it earlier, it did gain national, even international attention because you had the Ashton Kutcher, of course, the Hollywood celebrity, involvement in this. But Michael, from what we understand, he didn't actually play that big of a role in all of this.
No, he was kind of a supporting actor. But you know, it's funny, is if the case isn't outrageous enough,
right,
we have to throw a celebrity into the mix because now you're interested. But you know, he went to one of the victims' homes apparently not long after she had been murdered because they had a date. He looks through the window, he sees what he thinks is a wine stain, turns out later it's a blood stain, and he leaves. But I think the reason he got involved so quickly was he knew he might be a suspect because he had fingerprints on the doorknob. So, you know, Ashton Kutcher was trying to do the right thing and also get himself off the hook.
And Judge Willcott, when you have someone like Ashton Kutcher testifying in a trial like this, it becomes even more of a media circus. Does that distract the jurors at all from kind of looking at the evidence in the case?
I don't know that it distracts them. I almost think it makes them more interested because here are Hollywood stars that everybody basically has heard of and knows from films is sitting in the courtroom. So I think they're more wrapped with attention. Unfortunately, they may listen even harder because of that. And I do think the one other piece that's important is he does help with the chronological time frame of when he went and saw that so they can narrow down when it must have occurred or might have occurred.
Okay, Lakai, you're new to the debrief, so I'll put you on the spot here. What do you think's going to happen? We're going to the conclusion of this trial with closings tomorrow. You think they're going to get a guilty verdict on all counts? Can you predict?
I think that they will get a guilty verdict on all counts. I think that if they believe one, they are going to believe all of these cases. The modus operandi are...
All right, Lakai, sorry to have to cut you off. Unfortunately, we have to wrap. Thank you to my guests, and thanks for watching.